My name's Kris. I'm a PDRA at the University of York, working with Andy Weller. And today I'm going to chat to you about some of the work I've been doing in my postdoc over the last couple of years, specifically looking at this ethylene or ethene to propene reaction using our tandem. I know that's a little bit different than the title, solid-state molecular organometallic catalysis system. So why propene? Well, propene is probably one of the most important chemical feedstocks right behind ethylene. We make about 150 million tons a year, and that number is just growing every year. You can mostly find propene going into things like polypropene, epoxy propane, and propionitrile. Current industry synthesis for this is via steam cracking of propane, although there are other methods. These require really high temperatures, over 800 degrees. They're low yielding and really unselective. And so there's further issues there with purification of propene that you have to think about. Fortunately for us, as probably a lot of you in this audience will recognize some of these catalysts, the ethene to propene reaction has been getting significant attention. And again, most of these this reaction is catalyzed by heterogeneous catalysts, such as these tungsten hydride or nickel and silica, as well as molecular sieve type catalysts and zeolites. Now, again, these catalysts require pretty high temperatures, 150 to 600 degrees. Good to excellent conversions. However, it can decompose due to surface coking, which then degrades the catalyst and conversions start to go down. However, this reaction is really important because we can utilize biomass feedstocks to make bioethanol and then use oxide catalysts to turn that into bioethene. Bioethene can then be used straight into this process to then generate biopropene and make sustainable polymers. And so we looked at how these tungsten catalysts, for example, operate, and it's believed that this goes through a dimerisation of ethylene to 1-butene, an isomerisation to 2-butene, and then a final metathesis step with another equivalent of ethylene to generate your propene. And so as classically trained homogeneous organometallic chemists, we wanted to take this mechanistic cycle and sort of apply it to our own system. So our system that I've been talking about is this solid-state molecular organometallic chemistry, coined SMOM. You can blame Andy for that one. And really what we're doing here is taking traditional cationic rhodium or other organometallic compounds, crystallizing them into the solid state, and then doing all of our reactivity in the solid state. There are no solvents here. Okay, so in this case up here, you can see this rhodium dialkene complex. When you hydrogenate it, it stabilizes the formation of a sigma alkane complex. You can get crystal structures of these. You can do this on multi-gram scale, and then you can also do onward reactivity. Okay, so this is the only way, except to generate or isolate a sigma alkane complex, if it wasn't for a very good German main group chemist the other day who published an Angewandte showing that you can actually recrystallize these from solution now. The reason we think these work is because of the Barth anion. Okay, so the Barth anion is really weakly coordinating, and it has all of these fluorines on it that stabilize non-covalent interactions in the crystalline lattice. These CF3 groups also provide Flores channels for gas diffusion in and out of the crystalline lattice. Furthermore, you can see here that the Barth anions actually form sort of like a cage motif around the cations. And again, these are really important for keeping the crystal rigid and stops it from cracking effectively when your substrates go in and out of the lattice. So in 2020, we took this one step further and showed that you can actually take this sigma alkane complex and you can do catalysis with these solid state materials. So we can do 1-butene to 2-butene isomerization, both in batch and in flow. And so you could almost you could see how easy it is to think that if you have 3 different catalysts here, all working in tandem with each other, how we could apply this to generating the ethylene to propene reaction. And so we went looking and we found some catalysts that we thought were potentially good or would be useful for this. Our first catalyst is the dimerisation catalyst, this palladium etherate species, which has been sort of pioneered by Brookhart, Templeton, Kubas, and many other people nowadays. They were originally used for CO ethylene co-insertion reactions, but we are utilizing this as a dimerisation catalyst. Obviously, the isomerisation catalyst that we previously published, and then finally this tungsten metathesis catalyst, kindly given to us by Professor Michael Buchmeiser in Stuttgart. Now you can see that these catalysts all have different geometries of the Barth anion around the cation. There isn't any real chemical preference. There's no reactivity differences in terms of one packing diagram versus the other. And so really what we found is that the octahedral one, so the palladium species, and the bicap square arrangement, the rhodium compound, are more commonly found. But again, there's no real chemical benefit to having one or the other. Okay, so does this reaction work? Well, if you take these three catalysts, 5 milligrams of each one, into an NMR tube, you pressurize it with ethylene, you can then follow that reaction by gas phase NMR. And what you see is that your ethylene peak, this singlet here, over a period of about 12 hours diminishes, and you can see 2-butene as well as propene in the NMR. So we are forming propene just by using ethylene in this reaction. Because we're doing that by a gas phase NMR, we can actually plot a time course or a profile, and then we can see what's going on. And so the important line really to look at here is the sum of integrals line. This sum of integrals line is basically your mass balance of your reaction, okay? So every time we generate a molecule that's not gaseous, your mass balance is going to go down a little bit. So we can clearly see here that the reaction, although we generate a fair amount of propene, is also generating something else that's not particularly useful. And so we really wanted to find out why that was. And the good thing about our system compared to sort of homogeneous systems and maybe some other heterogeneous catalysts is that we can actually just pull apart all of the different catalysts and look at each one independently. And so that's what we did. So you start with the palladium catalyst, this nice white crystalline material, and then we put it under ethylene. And immediately you can see that the sum of integrals, or your mass balance, doesn't drop away significantly compared to the three-component system. We get about 85% retention of our mass balance, and GCMS analysis of the volatiles from this reaction show us that we're forming C6 and C8 alkenes that we can't see by gas phase NMR. You'll also notice that the ratio of C4 products is about 85 to 15% in favor of 2-butene to 1-butene. And so we can also put this reaction, this catalyst under 1-butene and show that it's actually a fairly competent isomerization catalyst as well. And the thing to note here is now our mass balance line, our sum of integrals, is dead straight. We're not forming any higher order oligomers in this reaction, which tells us that under ethylene, the ethylene must be inserting into C4 chains to form those higher order oligomers. Okay, so what about the rhodium now? So we can add the rhodium to the system. We have a mixture in the NMR tube. The profile looks pretty similar to the palladium system. The only difference now is that your 1-butene concentration has gone massively down, okay? The rhodium catalyst is a significantly faster isomerization catalyst than the palladium one, and so we still need that in there to really drive down the amount of 1-butene that we're getting. Otherwise, the profile looks the same. We're still getting about 84% retention of our mass balance. So we've looked at these two catalysts. We know that they can survive sitting in the same NMR tube. They're happy to coexist. There's no real cross-reactivity or anything like that going on, which really just leaves one catalyst. And you can see immediately that when we put this catalyst under propene, the mass balance goes away immediately. So the metathesis step is in equilibrium, and so we're always generating a little bit of ethylene and 2-butene when we put this catalyst under propene. However, you can see that they're pretty much a straight line, so there's always that whatever the background concentration is, and so we must be forming something else. This propene is going somewhere. GCMS analysis shows us that we're forming between C6 and C11 alkenes. And so the propene probably undergoing either metathesis with 1-butene and then can continue to metathesize to form longer oligomers. Now, the problem as well is that at the end of the reaction, we always saw these oily deposits on the inside of the NMR tube and on the crystals. Part of that could be the higher order oligomers that are effectively just condensing on the inside of the NMR tube. But we also noticed that, well, you have this high boiling carbene that has to go somewhere. And we independently synthesized this and showed by GC that that is there as well. And so that's quite a large molecule to get out of a crystalline lattice without really just shattering the crystals apart. And if you try and rerun this crystal on the diffractometer, there's no diffraction. They're not crystalline, they're just mush. Okay, so that's one of the downsides to this catalyst. But one of the ways that we can deal with this is by moving the system into flow. By moving the system into flow and sequencing these catalysts one after the other, we're effectively reducing the contact time between each substrate gas and the catalyst, thereby hopefully removing the amount of time given to then go on to do side reactions. So each one of these catalysts is mixed with silicon carbide. It's an inert material, but it helps with plugging in this stainless steel reactor. It also helps to disperse the catalyst over a wider surface area. So again, we look at each catalyst individually first. The palladium catalyst, we start here. Oh, sorry. What you can see is that we have about a 40% conversion from ethylene to a mixture of 1-butene and the 2 isomers of 2-butene. The palladium catalyst prefers cis-2-butene over trans-2-butene, with 1-butene sitting about 15% relative ratio. The GC trace shows you that product distribution, and that we have a really small amount of higher order oligomer formation. Again, that's exactly what we want to see moving from batch into flow. If you look at the pre-catalysis and post-catalysis pictures of this material, they're both still free-flowing solids, telling us that we're not really getting any degradation of this palladium species. You can actually recharge this catalyst indefinitely in batch and in flow, which is really nice to see. So addition of the rhodium catalyst, you can see that we have an initial conversion of about 50%, but this drops back down to about 40%. We're not quite sure why that happens, but otherwise we're sitting at that 40% with a really significant reduction down to the thermodynamic equilibrium of 1-butenes relative to 2-butenes. We also see a selectivity change in which isomer of 2-butenes is favored. We can look at the GC trace again to show that we don't really have significant formation of higher order oligomers, and then we get that isomer selectivity change. The pre-catalysis and post-catalysis picture, again, we can see that they're still free-flowing solids. However, we get a significant color change from this maroon of the sigma alkane complex to the resting state, which is a combination in the crystalline phase of 1-butene and 2-butene isomers. Okay, finally, tungsten. So we add the tungsten catalyst in. We did separate the reactors because we were worried about back diffusion of those oily oligomers and higher boiling alkenes. But what you'll notice is that we can actually get almost 60% conversion from ethylene to propene with a selectivity of over 92%, which eventually fades to about 70% after 7 hours, with concomitant formation of 2-butene. So this is telling us that this mimics our batch system. Our tungsten catalyst does start to degrade, but the palladium and the rhodium catalyst are still churning away, generating the 2-butenes. The GC trace shows you the formation of the propene and the other isomers of butene going away. What you'll notice, though, with this tungsten catalyst is the pre and post pictures. There's a pretty significant difference here. Obviously, we have a very nice free-flowing solid before, and then this sort of black, nasty, tar-like substance. And we were really interested in what the morphology of these catalysts, or specifically this one, was doing. So we turned to SEM to have a look at that. And so this red chip here is the silicon carbide. Anything in green is basically fluorine, and that denotes the active catalyst. And so you can see here that there's quite a few discrete single crystallites attached to the surface. They're not chemically bonded, they're just on top of it. And really what happens post-catalysis is you can see there's a significant change in how that looks. And there's an even distribution of this catalyst now over the surface of these silicon carbide chips. And what we think is happening is that the tungsten catalyst is actually dissolving back into those higher order oligomers / the alkene from the first turnover of metathesis, redistributing itself over the silicon carbide chips. And then that process, effectively, you lose crystallinity and then you lose reactivity. And so you get decomposition overall. The same cannot be said for the palladium and rhodium. These just hold up. These look the same pre and post catalysis. You get those individual crystallites on the surface of the silicon carbide. And so before I finish, I just wanted to show how robust this palladium catalyst actually is. And if you notice the axis here, this is in days, and we get a little bit of oscillatory behavior, but it's pretty much sitting at about 40–45% conversion. And I think we actually ended up running this for 13 days, and it just kept producing the same selectivity with no degradation in sight. And so we stopped after 13 days because the GC was required by other people. This big gap here in the middle is the weekend, and the GC turned off. So, but with that, I hope that I've been able to show you that we've taken this concept of looking at highly reactive compounds in the crystalline state into turning it into sort of batch catalysis that we can monitor using sort of traditional homogeneous type analytical techniques into a potentially industrially relevant catalytic on-stream process. For that, these people for acknowledgements, and thank you guys for listening.
That was excellent. Questions? Perhaps I could answer.
Yeah.
Your last catalyst appears to be the one that you'd like to address. And I guess there's various strategies. You might redesign the metathesis catalyst, with a big field of literature to go to there. Or you might think about strategies to try and maintain the crystallinity through changing the support. And I wonder which is your...
Yeah, that's a good question. We've been in contact with Michael Buchmeiser, whose group, they're experts in metathesis catalysts. There is one alternative where we can exchange that diphenyl carbene or the phenyl dimethyl carbene for a neopentyledene, which would be a gas as you do the metathesis. So that might help. The alternative is just to get completely rid of the cationic catalyst and go to a heterogeneous rhenium style catalyst that have shown to be really good heterogeneous catalysts for these sort of processes. So either we wouldn't mind switching out to a heterogeneous catalyst for that metathesis step, just because we know they are really excellent at doing that final step. Yeah.
I was wondering if you consider to do solid state NMR instead of NMR in the gas phase only, in order to also detect the less mobile regions.
Yeah, so we've done in the paper, sorry, I should have said this is all published now. We've done solid state NMR on every single catalyst from this reaction before and after and during. So the rhodium system is exceptionally well studied. We've done that previously, so we know exactly what goes on with that. The palladium one's really tricky. The resting states are really, really, really reactive. So you basically, because they lose a little bit of crystallinity, the solid state NMR is quite broad and you don't really get much information from that. Dissolving them up at -90 degrees, they basically just they degrade and you can't really see anything. The tungsten catalyst, solid state NMR, there's a peak at 300 ppm in the carbon. So make of that, if you know your carbon NMR shifts of carbenes, what you will. It's likely that it's either an ethylidene or a propylidene species. But again, if you try and dissolve that compound at -90, it instantaneously dies and you can't see anything.
Jessica, one more.
Interesting work. We're doing something similar with Andy on the propane synthesis.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't interested, or it didn't appear you were interested in the C6 to C11 oligomers, which do seem to fall in the kerosene range, which, if made from ethanol, would be very interesting for others.
Right.
Is there any particular reason why you didn't want to optimize that?
I think we were really just keen on trying to optimize the ETP process. And so obviously, yeah, just in terms of keeping the project sort of contained, yeah, we were just going after that. But I think there's probably scope to look at. Yeah, I mean, something I didn't say is that the palladium catalyst actually oligomerizes propene as well, exclusively to form C6. What isomers of C6, I'm not entirely sure, but I've done that reaction. It's fairly slow, but yeah, it does oligomerize propene to form C6.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.